Fellow Namibians, this week, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, announced that their government will not offer an official apology for Britain's colonial past, right? This follows King Charles's expression of greatest sorrow and regret regarding a visit to Kenya. Although he did not issue a formal apology or promise compensation. Now, the repercussions of British imperialism were profound and damaging all across the world. In Ireland, 1 million people starved during the 19th century. This was while food was exported by British authorities. Now, in Bengal, British policies led to the deaths of 3.8 million people in 1943 due to famine, right? Australia, on the other hand, witnessed a massacre of land depression and forceful removal of indigenous children, often sanctioned by colonial institutions. In Africa, Mother Africa, violent suppression was used to maintain control over colonies. Additionally, estimates suggest that Britain plundered around 35 trillion euros, which is 68 trillion US dollars from India, highlighting the humongous, you understand, economic impact of colonial rule, or rather colonial exploitation. Now, at least 10 million people were trafficked from Africa to America with the approval of the UK and European states. From the late 15th to the mid 20th century, or the 19th century, I think. Now, in addition, many of our ancestors died in those slave ships, including women, pregnant women, children, elders, even men, because I myself am an ex-fisherman and I know the conditions of the sea. It gets rough, it gets cold out there. Now imagine a lot of people compressed. There's no toilets, there's no food. It was just bad, and we all have seen all the slave movies, so you can just imagine for yourself how our ancestors were treated on those slave ships on their way to America. Now, in 2023, a United Nations judge argued that the UK owes about 18 trillion euros, which if converted into US dollars is 35 trillion dollars, in reparation for its involvement in slavery in 14 countries. Now, Dean of Trinity College, Cambridge, Reverend Dr. Michael Berner, wrote this year that the UK owes the Caribbean alone 200 billion euros. 200 billion euros. That is just the Caribbean alone in slavery reparations. The UK refuses to acknowledge and apologize its involvement in colonialism and across the Atlantic slave trade. Now, this is a huge insult to millions of Africans who suffered under the British imperialism. Africa and its children today and its children to come will never ever forget the horrors of of colonial exploitation, the violent suppression and theft of our resources. The British Empire, they caused scars that will never heal and pain that we will remember forever across its colonies. Yet, this very same today, the UK refuses to acknowledge responsibility, as seen in the unwillingness to engage in meaningful dialogues on the topic of reparations. Now, fellow Namibians, Itula claims to be a patriot, but he has close ties with Great Britain. Here are some key factors to prove my point. Number one, he has lived in the UK for over 30 years and has connections with influential British politicians. Number two, his wife, mind you, which is British, frequently travels to Europe to meet with investors. Number three, the IPC party raises funds for its campaign using money from the IUM, which is the International University of Management, which receives grants from Western countries. Now, number four, some media houses that support Itula, are funded by the UK or its allies. Number five, he also met with representatives from the Western countries just 6 months before the elections, despite not having a role in foreign policies. Do you remember the time British politicians talked about supporting IPC and it became a huge or rather a big deal online? Do you remember that? Now, the British actually, just to show that they aren't actually working with IPC, they wrote a letter to Itula. Now, many IPC supporters believe this whole situation and is actually convinced and are satisfied with it. But if Itula and the British High Commissioner to Namibia, Charles Moore, says now that they are not collaborating, can we really trust them? Fellow Namibians, listen to me carefully. This situation is getting very serious now. Strong forces are trying to get Namibia's resources, just like sharks in the ocean that smell blood. These opportunists are drawn to money and our oil. Now, if these resources were never discovered or weren't in Namibia, the dentists would have just focused on treating British teeth.